Hello, it's Jordan, and this video is being recorded on the afternoon of Thursday, March 10th, 2016. And there's been some talk in financial circles recently in the last day or so about Pierre Lassonde, who is on the Business News Network, that's BNN, Canada's version of CNBC. And last night, Pierre Lassonde, the chairman of Franco-Nevada, said he had an $8,000 target for gold based on the Dow to gold ratio. And as some people know, that ratio has made secular lows, I think 3 times around the 1 to 2 level, meaning that the gold would be either the same price as the Dow or half the price. So that's how he gets 8,000. He's taking a ratio of 2, dividing that into the current value of the Dow. Now, here I show you with monthly data, and this is a chart from my book. We have gold divided by the S&P 500. And I really like using the S&P 500 because it's just a broader index than the Dow. That's only 30 stocks. So I feel that it just gives us a better look at the gold to stocks ratio. Now, 2 things I want to talk about. First, let's talk about the high points here, where we see secular highs are basically anywhere from the mid-4s to the low 6s. Again, this is monthly data, so it's possible that intra-month these figures are even higher. I think that 1980 peak, I think that got up to as high as 7, maybe a little bit higher. But anyway, so we can see the peaks, where they are, what's in line with history. So looking at the S&P 500, right now it's at 2,000. If you take a ratio of 5 times 2,000, that gives you $10,000 gold. Now, even if you take a look at a lower market, like let's say the stock market goes to 1,000 and it's 50% lower, a ratio of 4 or 5, that gets you $4,000 to $5,000 gold. Now, if you take a ratio of 5 and you do it by 1,500, that's the S&P 500, about 25% lower than where it is now, you get a target of 7,500. So, I mean, these targets of 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, they all sound really unreasonable until you have actually looked at the history that we're showing you here. And you can see that, targets of anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 are actually reasonable based on the history of this relationship, which goes back nearly 150 years. I mean, we have data in this chart going back to 1897 or 1887. Now, the last thing I want to point out, which is really interesting, and another thing, the ratio is currently at 0.64. That's where it closed today. But the very interesting thing that I've noticed studying history, and this is why you have to look at these charts, these ratio charts, going back over 100 years. And one thing I found is basically there's a secular peak about every 40 years between the peaks in this ratio. Now, if you there was a peak in 1934 and 1942. I mean, that during the Great Depression, so I don't consider those to be 2 secular peaks. I consider it to kind of be one peak that happened twice. Now, if you take the midpoint of those 2 peaks in time, it would be 1938. And the peak before was 1896. So 1896, then 1938, that's 42 years. 42 years later is 1980 when we had the next peak. So push that forward another 42 years. That gives you 2022, which is 6 years from now. I think in my book, when I was looking at the exact months and the exact dates of these peaks, applying it forward, I think we came up with summer 2021, so that's a little more than 5 years. But you get the point. I mean, nobody has any clue. We can't predict the future. We don't know if the next peak is going to be 2025, 2018, 2020, etc. But based on this data, that would be my guess. If I had to make a guess, I'd say 2021 or 2022. And it's just fascinating how you have a peak here every 42 years. And so based on that, again, that would tell us that our next peak could be in the next 5 or 6 years. And looking at the peak as far as the value, a reasonable target is anywhere from 4.5 to 6, I would say. So, I mean, Pierre Lassonde's $8,000 gold prediction, it's very reasonable based on this. And I personally don't have a prediction, but I'll just say that we could see my prediction would be anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000. You'll probably get a blow-off move somewhere in the higher range of that 5,000 to 10,000. And if you also look at gold, the value of above-ground gold compared to total U.S. financial assets, look at the peaks. The secular peaks were around 20%, and this data was as of 2014, where it was 3.3%. I'll bet that in recent months, before precious metals have really exploded, that this figure is probably below 3%, maybe 2.5%, 2.7%. So look, this also tells you that gold can rise 5 or 6 times from where it was. What's 5 or 6 times its low, or times 1050 or 1100? I mean, you're getting close to 5 or 6,000. So, final comment: Pierre Lassonde, that target, very reasonable based on the historical relationship of gold to stocks, and I prefer to use the S&P 500 and not the Dow, because the S&P 500 is a much broader index, and it just gives a clean reading of the secular peaks and secular lows. That's all I got for now. If you want to get my book for free, go to thedailygold.com/book. Thank you everyone for listening and watching, and I wish you all the best.